Welcome friends to Granny's GodPod 111. The Gospel of John is traditionally attributed to John the Apostle, son of Zebedee and Salome, who with his brother James were the Galilean fishermen. They were among the first to be called by Jesus to form the group of 12 apostles. John's Gospel is an eyewitness account, the self-claimed true testimony of the unnamed disciple whom Jesus loved. He was part of Jesus' inner circle, witnessing key events like the Transfiguration, and was entrusted with caring for Jesus' mother Mary. He was a pillar of the early church, and he wrote more of the New Testament than any other disciple, being the author of 5 New Testament books: his Gospel, 1, 2 and 3 John, and the book of Revelation. John ministered in Ephesus and was eventually exiled to the Isle of Patmos for his faith. He is believed to be the only apostle to die of old age. Along with James and Peter, John was one of Jesus' closest confidants, appearing in more biblical accounts than the other disciples. There are 3 times in the synoptics when Peter, James and John witnessed things no one else saw. When Jesus raised Jairus' daughter from the dead, the Transfiguration, and the Garden of Gethsemane, where they went with Jesus to pray and keep watch. John was the only disciple to witness the crucifixion. His Gospel adds some minor details the synoptics omit. For instance, the names of minor characters like the high priest's father-in-law and the slave whose ear was severed at Jesus' betrayal. John also stresses the role of the Holy Spirit, promised by Jesus to be the bringer and spirit of truth, and to replace the earthly Jesus as our advocate. Jesus gave the brothers John and James the somewhat humorous nickname Boanerges, meaning sons of thunder. Whether this was down to speech, temperament or ambition, we are not told. However, in Luke 9:54, they asked Jesus if they should call fire down from heaven on a group of Samaritans who didn't welcome him into their village. Were they simply warriors for justice, or showing impulsive zeal? Even so, Peter seems to be the leader of the disciples. John is named in every Gospel except the one named after him. In ancient writings, authors often omitted themselves from an account or used third-person descriptions to disguise their identity. John uses the phrase, the one whom Jesus loved, 5 times. This person is not Peter, with whom the unnamed one interacts, often in contrast to Peter. And it is not James, John's brother, who was executed by Herod Agrippa sometime between 41 and 44 AD. So James died too early to have written this Gospel. It has been suggested that the disciple Jesus loved was actually Lazarus, not John. But while we know Jesus loved Mary, Martha and Lazarus, Lazarus was not one of the 12 disciples. John may be the disciple leaning on Jesus at the Last Supper. After Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, only 2 disciples follow at a distance. Only Peter is named in the synoptics, and scholars believe the other disciples was John himself. And when Mary Magdalene discovers the empty tomb, she runs to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. And the other disciple was the one who outran Peter and reached the tomb first. John was thought to be the youngest apostle, dying about 98 AD. Ancient sources may or may not refer to the Apostle John by various other names, including John of Patmos, John the Evangelist, John the Elder, and John the Presbyter, though it is unclear if all, or indeed any, of these names do in fact refer to this John. Neither can John the disciple of Jesus be the same person as John the Baptist, who was the son of Zechariah and Elizabeth. When there were disputes in the early church, Peter, James and John, together with Paul, were the ones consulted. Prominent leaders in the early church claimed to learn directly from John, including the bishops Polycarp of Smyrna and Ignatius of Antioch. Irenaeus specifically identifies the author as John the Apostle. John, the disciple of the Lord, who also had leaned upon his breast, did himself publish a gospel during his residence at Ephesus in Asia. And Eusebius of Caesarea, known as the father of church history, says John was entreated by his friends to write a spiritual gospel, which was likely written towards the end of the 1st century. John's Gospel is so different and does not include the same incidents or chronology found in the other 3 Gospels. He records events that occurred before the arrest of John the Baptist, while the Synoptics record Jesus' ministry after the arrest. The Synoptics emphasize Jesus' humanity, teaching and actions. John emphasizes Jesus' divinity and eternal identity. In closing his gospel, John says, "We know his testimony is true, but he has only covered a small part of the things that Jesus did." Well, that's all for this one. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, it's free. Thanks a lot. Bye.